Hi again, here we are to talk about React and React Native, and we're going to continue working on our app that's going to grab weather data on the internet and display it. So, in the last video we created a new project and we set up some default components. And, our app looks kind of like this right now. It doesn't look like much. But what I'd like to do now is get the current location. So I want to get the geolocation, the X and Y latitude and longitude coordinates to get our position, right? And we can supply those to the weather, the dark sky weather API to get the weather information for that location. If you're in the iOS simulator, you can take a look at it right now. If you got the simulator open and you go to the debug menu, there's a location option down here, right? Because when we get the location here in the simulator, it's not the same thing as getting the location on the device, and your computer may not actually have the capability to get the geolocation, right? So the simulator allows you to test the geolocation with the debug menu. So you'll notice here on the menu there's a location option at the bottom, and there's a few options here. There's none, custom location, Apple, city bike ride, run, and drive. The default debug location is the Apple headquarter down in Menlo Park or Atherton. I forget where they're at, but Cupertino, right? So this is their default location. When you choose city, ride, run, and drive, these simulate the location changing over time, right? And they all kind of start at the Apple headquarters, and this goes at the speed of a bicycle and this goes at a run, and they just kind of follow a random path. I don't know exactly how they decided on the path. You can also plug in your own custom location. So if you want to test a location where you're at and the geolocation, the geo coordinates for that, you can choose this option and just type in the geolocation, right? So anyway, make sure you have that turned on, because if it's set to none, then it won't work, right? So make sure this is set. I'm going to leave it on bicycle ride. And what next, right? So we got that. So another thing that happens with iOS is you need to set a privacy option that asks users if you can use their location or not. So your app has to ask for permission. Okay, it has to say like, hey, can I use your permission, or can I have permission to get your location for these reasons, right? So to set that, we can't actually do that in React Native through JavaScript. We have to actually do that in the Xcode project. So let's give it a try first, and then it'll fail, and then we'll set that up, okay? So we're going to just talk about the JavaScript end of this first, and then we'll talk about setting up the info plist and adding permissions for the location, right? So what are we going to do? Let's go to Safari here, and I have navigator.geolocation open. So what is this? Well, this is the JavaScript method that gets your geolocation. So this works in the browser, and it also works in React Native, okay? So I'm actually on the wrong page here. I want to be on this page. Using geolocation, right? Let me zoom out a little bit. I'll zoom back in. I don't know. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to say navigator.geolocation and then call methods off this geolocation object, okay? This little block of code shows you how to text to see if the device supports geolocation or not. So we could throw that in if you want. And then to get the current position, you're going to call get current position. Okay, so here's an example: navigator.geolocation.getCurrentPosition, and the parameter right here is a callback, right? So this whole thing, right? The first parameter there is a callback function that receives the position as a parameter. Okay, so the position is a JavaScript object with coordinates, latitude, and longitude. Okay, so you can see we got position, and then there's position.coordinates, latitude, longitude, right? This current position actually takes three parameters. In this example, they're only showing the first one, okay? And let me scroll down a little bit here. Yeah, here we go, right? So here's a good example. This says navigator, geolocation. This is actually watch position, but get current position works the same way. So we can say watch position success. So this is a callback that is sends us the position and calls this method and passes this position in as a parameter. The error is a callback. It's another function that receives an error object and executes the code inside the callback if there's an error. And then this last one is an object with options. So this just tells the navigator geolocation how to get your position. And there's some options in here for accuracy. You can see they've got the options listed here: enable high accuracy, maximum age, and timeout. Okay. So let's give it a try, right? So anyways, there's just kind of a quick overview there. Here's get current position with success and error, right? So this is kind of the same thing. Each one of these is just a method, right? So they've just defined the error method and the success method up here, right? So error takes, I think error is actually supposed to take an error object here. Anyway, let's give it a try, right? And actually, you know what? I think React Native has this in their API section. Let's actually go take a look at that. So I'm going to go to docs. I'm going to find the API here. Yeah, so under APIs, you can see, I'm in the React Native docs. Under APIs, you can see geolocation listed. So this is APIs, right? There's geolocation. And then this gives us, another overview of how geolocation works in React Native, which, might be a little bit different than the standard JavaScript one. And I think these are basically the same. And you can see it's got get current position, success, error, and options, right? And they kind of mark these two with a question mark because they're optional. Like, we don't have to include those. We got to definitely include the success though. Okay. So anyway, let's try and implement these, right? So we'll go back to our app, and we've got our weather component here. And what we want to do is we want to set up some state. Okay, so the state will contain our location, and by putting the location in state, if we change the state, right, and change the location by setting it on state, then the component will update automatically, right? So let's set up the constructor. Right, and maybe our constructor might take in some props for one reason or another. We're not using them yet, but we might in the future. And we should pass our props to super, and then we'll say this dot state equals a JavaScript object with a property called position. I'm going to set it equal to null by default. So the beginning value or the initial value will be null, right? Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add component will mount. Okay, so this means our component is about to be displayed on the screen, and let's do something. So here's what we want to do. We want to get the location, right? There you go, right? And then after we've got the location, we can do something with it, like we can set it on our state. Okay, so let's try that, right? So what we'll do is we'll call navigator dot what is it? Oh yeah, geolocation dot get current position. Okay, so that looks pretty good there. And we could always refer to the docs too, so you can always refer to this, right? So we got get current position. So now we need 3 parameters here, though the second 2 are optional, right? So we'll just do the first one for now. We can add the other ones later. So our first one is our success. So we could break that into its own function, or we could use a closure here. I think I'm going to just use the closure because we're not really going to use this anywhere else. So I'll just write an ES6 style function. The parameter coming in will be position, right? And then I'll just add a line return there to make it a little easier to read. And if we get the position, then we'll do this. We'll just console log it for now, right? So we'll say console log position. How about that, right? And then also we want to set the position on our state. So we'll say this dot set state. And then we want to, set state. So we'll include a JavaScript object with the key that we want to change, the key over here, right? And we'll set it equal to position. And if we're using ES6, this would actually translate to the same thing. So if you don't include the key and you put a variable in, then the key will match the name of the variable. Okay, so we can shorten this to this, right? So this again, this is this right here, key position equals variable position, right? If we write it like this, it's the same thing. Okay, so we'll set the state there. And you know what I realized, since we didn't do that thing with the info p list yet, we'll get an error. It won't get the position. So let's actually include that second callback here, right? So I'll put a comma here after the curly brace, and we'll write in another function here that takes in an error. And then we'll say, maybe I'll do this too. I'll put in another console log, and we'll call this success. And then over here, we'll say error, and we'll log the error message. Right, so I'm guessing since we haven't set the permissions in the info p list, we're going to get an error. So we might as well try and print that out, right? Okay. And then we'll worry about updating our component to display the weather later. So anyway, so that looks pretty good. Let's save it all, and then we can go back to let me hide this, and go back to the simulator, and then we'll refresh. Oh, it says, hey, can we use it says allowing weather API access to your location. Do you want to use the weather app? Oh, wait, I think I have to set that. I said allow. Let's check that in the console. I think I need to set that. Maybe I don't. Let's try it. So let's just check our log messages in the console. I'm going to do Command D, and then I'll choose remote debug, or debug JS remotely, okay? And then it'll open up Chrome. And actually, I guess it looked like it kind of worked there. Huh. So it says success, and then I get the object there. I thought I had to set that in the info p list. Anyway, I guess if you want to customize the message, maybe you got to set it. Okay, so anyway, so here's our coordinates. You can see there's a timestamp, and then it says coordinates, and it's got accuracy, and then it says latitude and longitude, right? So let's display those now. So you'll see this object has a coordinates or coords property that is an object, and then it has latitude and longitude in there, right? So let me hide this and get back to our code. And when we set position here, it will re-render our component because we're setting position with set state. Okay? So that means in the render method down here, we can check. We can say, hey, when you render, if let's do this. Let's say, let's do it this way. Let's say const position equals, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of those inline conditionals, and we'll say this dot state dot position does not equal null. Okay, so if this is not null, then we'll put in the we'll say position equals actually wait, let's rewrite that. Let's do it this way. We'll just do it with it'll be too far off the screen. Why don't we just write that all in one line? Why don't we say const, or let's say var. Let's do var position equals this dot state dot position. This will be better. It'll just be easier to read, right? So we'll write it this way, and then we'll check it. We'll say, hey, you know what? Why don't we say var message equals weather. So this is what we had before, right? So it'll say that, and then we'll put the weather message in here, or the message, right? Okay, so it'll print that out. But then you know what we'll do is we'll check it. We'll just say like, hey, you know, if position does not equal null, then we'll change the message to something more interesting, right? So we'll say message equals, and I'm going to use the ES6 string concatenation thing. So we'll use the 2 backticks, right? So that's the character to the left of the number 1. And what we'll do is we'll say latitude is, and then I'll use the $sign with the curly braces, and we'll say position. And if you recall, it was position coords dot latitude, and then longitude will be position dot, and this is still going to be really long, coords dot longitude. There we go, right? Okay, so that's a little long there. I wonder if that lets you put this on the next line. Maybe not. I'll just try it. Maybe that'll work. Let's give it a try. Oh, latitude 37 something and negative 122 something or other, right? So that actually looks correct. And we'll just check our timestamp here. Let's actually try it with the debugger open, right? I'll make that a little bigger, and then we'll refresh it again. Yeah, so it should show just for a moment. It should show, it's hard to see it there, but it should flash weather, and then it should get the coordinates like a moment later, and then display them. So anyway, so that seems to be working pretty good. So our next step then is to use the coordinates to pass them on now to the weather API, and then wait for a response there with the weather data, and then we'll actually display the weather data here. Okay, so anyway, thanks for watching. I'm glad that worked for you. Just while we're on it, you know, if you want to set the message in the info plist, I thought we would have to do that, but apparently it works without. What you can do is you can go into your app. I'm looking at the React project folder here, and you can see there's index iOS and index Android, and then my components folder. There's another folder here called iOS, and if we open up the project here, the Xcode project, it should be Weather API Xcode proj, right? If we open that up, and then we see it in Xcode, if you go to the sidebar here, you got to click this little folder, and you'll see a list of folder groups. And if you open the first one, I think it'll show you info plist. There'll be a file in there, info plist, and this is the info plist here. And it's probably really hard to see on the video. I can't really make the text on this bigger. But what you'll do is you'll go to the bottom, and if you click on any one of these, and there'll be a little, or if you hover over it, there'll be a little plus sign. And if you click on that, it will make a new line and then give you a list of options. And what you want to do is you want to look for privacy dash location. Actually, for some reason, it should code hint it. Let me see if I can find a location. Well, maybe I can just find it on the list here. It's not code hinting it for me yet. Privacy, location, usage description. I think that's the one, right? So we'll choose location, usage description, and then over here on this side in the value column, so that's in the key column, what you'll do is it'll be type string, and then you can type in your message, and you can say weather, weather API, that's the name of our app, needs your location to find the weather, find weather data for you. How about that, right? And then there we go. And so we can save that. I'll close my Xcode project there, and then we can restart. Actually, you know, I guess I gotta quit the app here. Let me let's do this. So if you're in the simulator, if you do Command Shift H, or go to the hardware menu and choose Home, it's like you're hitting the home button on the phone. So I'm actually gonna double tap the home button to get to the Weather API app, and I'll close it, and then I'll open it up again. I guess actually it still has that. I guess I'm gonna have to do a little more to get that message, but I think it, anyway, that kind of works for you, right? So give that a try, and then we'll continue this in the next video.